Please put your hands together and welcome Jeff Vankooten.
A merchant ship loaded with precious jewels, gold, and silver was on its way back to port when it was confronted by a pirate ship, skull and crossbone flag flapping in the wind. The excitable first mate asked the captain what they should do, and the captain said, "First mate, go into my water chest and bring me my red shirt." The captain wore the red shirt, and he was an inspiration to his men, and they repelled that pirate ship without any casualties. A couple other days went by, and this time, this merchant ship was confronted by 3 pirate ships, skull and crossbone flag flapping in the wind. The excitable first mate again asked the captain what they should do, and the captain said, "First mate, go into my water chest and bring me my red shirt." The captain fought valiantly. He was an inspiration to the men, and they repelled those 3 ships with hardly any casualties. That night, as they were celebrating, the first mate asked and inquired about the secret of the red shirt. And the captain said, "Well, it's quite easy, really simple. It's red because if I get wounded, you won't see the red of the blood, and the men will be inspired to continue on and fight." A couple days went by. This time, the merchant ship was confronted by 10 pirate ships, skull and crossbone flags flapping in the wind. The excitable first mate again asked the captain what they should do, and the captain looked at the first mate and said, "First mate, go into my water chest and bring me my brown pants." Now, I share that with you this afternoon because there are many opportunities for us to wear our brown pants today. We have marauders, pirates, marauders of fear, which bear down upon us, sailing on a sea of change. And this sea of change has some unique currents. The changes today, the currents of this sea of change, are fast and they're deep. Change is coming at a breakneck pace, and the ramifications of the changes we are experiencing today are unprecedented. In fact, I believe there's only been 2 other times in human history where humans have lived through such tumultuous change with such great ramifications. You think about societal marauders that bear down upon us. I just read yesterday that 76% of Americans are fearful and believe the United States is on the decline, and so we wear our brown pants. You think about the technological advances, how fast they're going, and what it means to be human in the midst of all of that, and we're a little bit fearful of where technology is going to take us, and so we wear our brown pants. Think about education. We used to lead the world in education, and now there's concern that we're lagging far behind. How do we educate people in this day and age? What does it mean to be truly educated? We're fearful about that, and we wear our brown pants. And then, of course, I don't have to share with you the fearful marauder of the economy and what it is doing, and everybody is reached in the tentacles all across the globe, and we wear our brown pants. And you think about the political marauder. We can't seem to get things figured out. Into the 80s, 80% of Americans have no trust in the U.S. government, and so we wear our brown pants. But not only are those broad, sweeping marauders bearing down on us, but there are personal marauders too, right? Things that cause us to be fearful. There is diagnoses, there are layoffs. All those things cause us to wear our brown pants. Now, when we confront fear like that, when the marauders are bearing down upon us on this sea of change, we react and respond in various ways. Some people retrench. They just grit their teeth and they dig in their feet, and they're not going to move and budge no matter what the change is doing. Other people will retreat. They'll go back with a tail between their legs and just kind of give up. And those who give up end up just resigning to the fact that there's no way we can change this. I'm not even going to try. Let it do its damage. But I am here and I'm passionate because I believe there is another response, and that is to resile. Resile is a verb, and it is the root to resilience. And resilience basically means your ability to bounce back and thrive in the midst of significant stressors. To bounce back and thrive in the midst of the fear and the wigged out, wild, and wacky world that we live in, resilience is key. The Harvard Business Review did a study of over 50 companies and businesses, and their conclusion was that more than education, More than experience, resilience was the number one factor for success in that company. So what we need today, I believe, more than any other time, is an ability to be resilient. And as we have these marauders bearing down upon us, we need resilient rules of engagement, new rules of engagement that will help us engage this fear and triumph in the midst of a wild, wacky, and wonderful world on many levels. The first rule of engagement is you need to be ready not to be ready. Now that sounds like something that was conjured up over 2 or 3 pints of beer in a bar. You know what? You need to be ready not to be ready. But it makes a lot of sense because we live in a world that seems out of control, and the fact of the matter is, it is. And in order to be ready not to be ready, we have to make some contingency plans. We have to put some things in place that will prepare us for a future that we can't quite predict, even though we may put all our ducks in a row, but they can be shattered at the end. In order to be ready not to be ready, we need to make some contingency plans. And the first contingency plan is we need to embrace uncertainty and chaos. Just embrace it. Now, I don't know if you remember the TV show Get Smart with Maxwell Smart and the shoe phone. A movie was made recently with Steve Carell. But what's interesting about that show is it came onto the scene in the United States in the late 60s, early 70s. And if you think about what was going on historically at that time, the United States seemed to be spiraling into chaos. I mean, we had the Vietnam War, the economy was stalling, and Watergate was just around the corner. And here comes this show called Get Smart. And he works against an enemy organization. And this enemy needed to be defeated. And the name of the organization of the enemy was Chaos. Now, Maxwell Smart worked for the heroic institution, the heroic organization that was going to defeat chaos. And the name of his organization was Control. Now, it's interesting because we felt like we needed to control and get control back, even in the midst of the chaos we were experiencing, and yet the fact of the matter is, chaos is what rules the day. Sociologists say that we live under what's called the illusion of control. And we live by it every single day in order to kind of keep chaos in check. Think about an elevator. If you're standing by an elevator and you push that button and it lights up, it tells you it's been activated. But if this elevator doesn't come on our time frame, if it doesn't come when we want it to, what do we end up doing? We press it again, right? As if we can control this huge mechanical contraption on our time frame. Maybe where I live under the illusion of control more than any place else is traffic jams. I play traffic jams like chess games. I begin to make moves 2 or 3 times in advance, and I always pick one car. I don't know what reason. Maybe it's the color, maybe it's the make, but it's going to be my competitor. I'm going to measure my progress up against this car. Maybe you've done this. And I'll make my moves. I'll be very strategic, and I'll go by the guy, and I'll be waving just as I go. And all of a sudden, as I continue to make my moves, I'll look in the rearview mirror, and doggone it, if that car isn't coming up and behind me and passes me. And at the end of the day, I realize it wasn't me that was controlling that traffic jam. In many ways, it was the chaos of that jam that had the better of me. But in order to be ready not to be ready, we just have to come to grips with the fact that we live under the illusion of control, and we can't control everything that's out there. We can't control those large marauders that are on the horizon, and we shouldn't even try. We can take some control of our reaction to that, but for the most part, in order to be ready not to be ready, one of the contingency plans we have to put in place is we have to embrace uncertainty. But you also need to enact an uncertain plan. Every plan you make is a bad one. And many companies, they spend millions of dollars and they do research to try to come up with a business plan that's going to lead them precisely where they need to go into the next 5 years. No plan is perfect. Every plan that you make is a bad plan, but it's better than the plan that you had before. So in order to embrace uncertainty, one of the other contingency plans is you need to enact and operate from a bad plan. Because if you wait to take a trip till all the lights are green, you will never, ever go. So don't worry about the plan that you have in place for your business or for your life. It's a bad plan. But it's better than any other plan that you have. And then you take soundings as you go. Where am I and where do I want to go? And you adjust that bad plan and you come up with another bad plan that will move you forward. In a nutshell, to be ready, not to be ready, you need to embrace uncertainty and enact an uncertain bad plan. Because a bad plan produces serendipity. And serendipity is what makes life rich on many levels, because you can have a relational uncertainty, and that can lead to romance. Spiritual uncertainty can lead to mystery. Occupational uncertainty often leads to people's destinies, and an intellectual uncertainty, more often than not, leads to revelation. An uncertain bad plan is full of serendipity, and it's a wonderful way for us to be ready, not to be ready. So that is the first resilient rule of engagement. A second resilient rule of engagement is we need to make full use of the present. Time is a weird concept. Einstein, the physicist, proved that time is a relative concept. It's not a set constant in the universe. It changes depending on how fast we are to the speed of light and all of this stuff. The past is gone, but it still has an impact on our present moment. The future still isn't here, and it still makes us worried in this present moment. But the present moment is all that we have. It's the only tangible time period that we can have an impact in. And so we need, if you want to be resilient, to engage these marauders of fear on a sea of change, you need to make full use of the present. And you can do this if you grasp the unique features of time. One of the unique features of time is that it is short. It's very short. If for instance, the average lifespan of an American is about 72 years old, and if you put a 72-year life against the backdrop of a 3.7 billion year universe, so the universe is purported to be about 3.7 billion years, if you put a 72-year life in front of that, in relative terms, in the perception of that 3.7 billion-year-old universe, it equals 12 seconds. So against the backdrop of the entire universe, our 72-year life is in relative terms a 12-second life. And I've done a little bit of research to determine how we spend our 12 seconds on this planet. How long do you think in years we sleep? And that's from when you come out of the womb until you go into the grave, and let's say you do 8 hours a night, every night for 72 years. You add that all up, 24 years. We sleep in our life for 24 years. And if you apply that to the 12-second life, that is 4 seconds right there just snooking in our beds. But we also need to work, right? And let's say you start work at about the age of 18 and you work until the retirement age as it is today at 65, and you put 40 hours in a week, and some put less in, some put more. But on the average, if you added all that up, we worked in our lives a cumulative total of 12 years. 12. Doesn't sound all that much. And wouldn't it be great if we could all just get it over with at once? Just do the 12 years and get it over with and be done? But there is right now 2 seconds that have just gone from our 12-second life. So between sleeping and between working, we have spent 6 seconds, half of our time. How many years do you think we spend watching television or involved in other screen-related activities? Think about that for a minute. Think about the number of screens, the number of channels that are available today. This statistic goes up more and more and more every single year, but they have concluded that if we put all the time together that we spend watching TV and various screen-related activities, that is 18 years. 18 years of our lives we spend in front of the boob tube or other screen-related activities. That right now is 3 seconds of a 12-second life. So now we have 6, 7, 8, 9 seconds that are gone just between sleeping, just between working, and just between entertaining ourselves. But we wait in line, right? get groceries at the grocery store, to navigate a traffic jam. We wait in line for about 12 years total. That's another 2 years. And so now what we're left with is 1 second. 1 second is what we have left in order to make meaning of the other 11 seconds that have come, and in order to be resilient. In order to make the most of hard times, to confront and engage fear as we know it, as it comes to us in this weird, wild, and wacky world, is we need to make full use of the moment, that 1 second, and realize that it's short. And if you realize how short life is, it makes differences in how you make decisions. But you also need to realize how valuable time is. The value of time is time. So if we have 1 second of unencumbered activity, if you will, we need to realize that that is an incredibly valuable second. We don't want any of that to waste. But it's hard because life is short, it flies by, and it is incredibly valuable. And we come to a time in our lives oftentimes when we're filled with angst about the time that we spend. And if you've seen the movie City Slickers, Billy Crystal is the lead character in there, and he is having a midlife crisis. He's starting to see that his life is passing him by, that it is incredibly short, and he's wondering where to put the value, and he's having some angst about that. His son, in this movie, asks him to present to his 5th grade class what it is he does for a living. And his son figures out that what his dad does, Billy Crystal, is he is a radio ad guy. He sells air, which doesn't sound all that exciting. And so his 5th grade son introduces Billy Crystal, his dad. He says, I want you to meet my dad. He's a submarine commander. Well, that's the final straw for poor Billy Crystal. And so he stands up before you, the 5th grade class, and he goes into a tirade about time and life and the swiftness of it and its value. And he says this to you: value this time in your life, kids. Because this is the time in your life when you still have your choices. And it goes by so fast. When you're 20, when you're a teenager, you think you can do anything, and you do. Your 20s are a blur. Your 30s, you start a family, you make a little money, and you think to yourself, what happened to my 20s? Your 40s, you grow a little bit of a belly, you grow another chin. A girlfriend from high school becomes a grandmother, and the music starts to get too loud. The 50s, you have a surgery. You'll call it a procedure, but it's a surgery. The 60s, the music's still too loud, but it doesn't matter because you can't hear it anyway. The 70s, you and the missus retire down to Florida where you start having dinner at 2 in the afternoon, lunch at 10 in the morning, breakfast the night before, and you mumble to yourself, how come the kids don't call? How come the kids don't call? Your 80s, you'll have a massive stroke, and you'll end up babbling to some Jamaican nurse whom your wife can't stand but whom you call mama. Any questions? And the 5th grade class is just looking at Billy Crystal. But there is that moment in time when we realize life is short and time is valuable. And in order to really engage our lives in a very effective, resilient way, we need to know and make full use of the present. So be ready not to be ready. Make full use of the present. But we also need to live with the long view. We need to get up into the skybox and look down on the totality of life and what is going on. And in order to be resilient and engage the fear of our world today, we need to live with a long view. And you do that by attending to life's investments. There are 2 investments, 2 long-term investments that you want to make into your life in order to live with a long view. And the first is you want to invest in your life's portfolio. The sum of all the decisions and the actions that you take. If you've been to a dog race with the greyhounds, the way they get these greyhounds to race is they use a mechanical rabbit. And wherever you go, in any racetrack across this nation, that rabbit is named the same thing: Rusty. And if you put a bet down on the dogs and you stand by the track to watch them race, the announcer, wherever you are in the United States, will go, "Here comes Rusty!" And they open the gate, and that mechanical rabbit goes down the oval of the track. The dogs are just going nuts. The saliva is flying from their mouth. And that's how they get them to run. Every once in a while, one of those greyhounds catches the rabbit. That dog will never race again. Because I think he realizes he has been duped. He's chasing after something that's not even really real. And when we live with the long view, we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we're chasing that isn't really real? Spend your lives in pursuits in which love is truly exemplary. Spend your life in pursuits in which love is truly exemplary. So we want to invest in life's portfolio in order to live with the long view, but we also need to invest in our life's perspective. All of us live with a philosophy, whether we can articulate it or not, that drives how we live out our lives. And sometimes the best way to see people's philosophy of life is to look at their bumper stickers. Bumper stickers are philosophical statements that are slapped onto a car, giving you some insight into the philosophy of life of that particular person. I saw one the other day, and it was just fantastic. It said, "There is no gravity, the earth sucks." That's a great philosophy in life. So that's a philosophy, right? Another one I saw is, what if the hokey pokey really is what it's all about? How depressing would that be? Think about what you would put on your bumper sticker. And if you haven't done this, I would do it. Boil down what is most important to you. What is your big why? What is it that drives you and gets you up in the morning? Mine is reimagine a hope-filled world. My passion when I get out of bed and I'm kissing my wife and I'm saying bye to my kids as they go to school and I go out and I do my activities, what drives me is I am passionate about helping people reimagine a hope-filled world. That's what I'll slap onto my car. So in order to live with the long view, you not only need to invest in your life's portfolio, but you need to invest in life's perspective. Depression has an incredibly tight logic. And I should know because I have struggled with bone-jarring depression the majority of my life. And I could make the most compelling case as to why all of you should be depressed. And it would be a tight argument. I could show you example after example after example. But that's no way to go through life. You need to bust through that tight logic, and you do that living with the long view and infusing your life with hope. So how do we engage these marauders of fear? Well, we need to do this with rules of engagement. First is to be ready, not to be ready. Second is to make full use of the present. Third is to live with the long view. The fourth is we need to let go of what's going away. And I've had to do that with my hair. When I was younger, I had a nice wave in my hair, and now I just have a beach. And it's expanding every single day. And guys, if I can just speak to us intimately for a moment, I just read a statistic that we, you and I as men, we replace our underwear once every 8 years. Why don't we let that go? I do remember though in college I would wait till it was just an elastic band, and then I would go ahead and I would replace my underwear. We need to let go of what's going away. And maybe it's a business plan. Maybe it's something that worked for you in the past but just isn't as driving you nuts. You got to let it go. You got to let go of what's going away. And you can do that if you initiate 2 strategies. The first strategy to help you let go of what's going away is you need to risk. You need to be a risk taker. You need to take some chances on things. They say that those who take great risks make 2 major mistakes a year. Those who don't take any risks make 2 major mistakes a year. You're going to blow it anyway, right? You might as well blow it doing something that's going to matter. So in order to let go of what's going away, you need to implement the strategy of risk, but you also need to implement the strategy of relaxation. We are so tense. The nerves are on edge in this country and in people's lives, and we need to just sort of catch our breath and to relax again a little bit, because when we can relax, we can let go easier than if we are tense and if we are tight. Think about a trapeze artist, and let's say all of us are on a trapeze, and we've chosen a certain career, and we've chosen a certain path in our family, and however that looks, and we're on this trapeze, and we're going like crazy, and it's exhilarating. But then all of a sudden you look back and you realize there is an empty trapeze coming to you, and you know you have to grab it. You just know you have to. It's the only way you're going to move on again. And the only way you're going to be able to jump from one trapeze into the next is, number one, you have to know you got to take the risk. And number two, you have to relax enough that your fingers come off of that trapeze and you jump over the chasm and onto the next trapeze, and there goes another exciting adventure of your life. Let go of what's going away and lean forward into what is coming, and you do that by risk and relaxation. And we have to give up our hope that we're going to have a better past. We have to give up our hope that we're going to have a better past. It's just not going to happen. We've got to let go of what's going away. So be ready not to be ready. Make full use of the present. Live with the long view. Let go of what's going away. And then also take time to think. We're Googling more and thinking less. They say that collectively as North Americans, you and I as Americans, we download collectively into our brains and into our lives 3.6 zettabytes of information. Now, I don't know how many zeros are behind that precisely, but I know it's a really big number. 3.6 zettabytes. They say that's as much information that is contained in every single book that has ever been published in human history, downloaded into our lives every year. That's as if you Twittered consistently, constantly, nonstop for 100 years. That is the amount of information that is dumped into our lives. And as a result, psychologists tell us we default into what's called a narcotizing dysfunction. We become numb to the information. We're not quite sure how to pick out what's important and what we should listen to and not listen to, what we should attend to, how we should use that information to make decisions. And in order to be resilient, you need to take some time to think and to begin to process all that information that comes into our lives. And you can do that if you attend to some practices of mindfulness. And the first practice of mindfulness is you need to contemplate. You need to go somewhere, you need to shut off all the noise and all the places and just spend time and percolate the information that has come into your life that day. The Greek root for scholarship, the Greek word, the root for school, is schola. And schola in the Greek language means leisure. So for the Greeks, education and learning was a time of leisure. And what they meant by that was they had the time to explore a topic deeply and richly and own it for what it was. I'll work with teachers and I'll ask them, do you feel like your classroom is a place of schola? And they'll look at me and go, you kidding me? Are you kidding me? It is so tense and tight in there. I can hardly dive into any one topic. There's no way we can even contemplate what's important in this subject. But if you want to be resilient, you have to do that. And the second mindful practice beyond contemplation is what I call resonation. When I was out of college, I liked to road bike, and my friends and I from college, we went on a bike ride, about 120-mile ride, and we would get on each other's wheels, we would draft, and when someone kind of got in front of us, started to weave a little bit, our line was, hold your line, big fella. That's what we would yell, hold your line, big fella. And what we're trying to do is say, align where you're at. Don't be waving like this. And when you resonate and when you take time to contemplate, you align who it is you are with how you act on the outside. And that's called integrity. And the world needs integrity. We need people who are full of integrity and hold the line. And so to take time to think, you need to contemplate and you need to resonate. In other words, you need to be focused. But there's another resilient rule of engagement beyond taking time to think. You got to stop being a should head. SHOULD. Stop shoulding on yourself. And we're good at it. I'm really good at it. We point the finger at ourselves. We're our own worst critic. And whenever you use the word should, you're leading down a path of destruction. Should is a horrible word. We shouldn't use it with anybody else, but we really use it for ourselves. We should on ourselves all the time. And we've got to stop doing that. And one of the ways you can do that is if you take some preventative measures. The first preventative measure to keep you from shoulding on yourself is to monitor your self-talk. That ticker tape that keeps going through your brain, that backstory that goes on there, the explanatory style of what is happening in your life and your reaction to it, in between those two things is your self-talk. And what is it saying? Is it critical? Is it irrational? Is it unfair? And you need to begin to ask those questions. My dad is a classic example of this. He'll lose his eyeglasses in the morning. He'll misplace them, and right away, the day's shot. Whole day is shot. He misplaced his glasses. I'm like, Dad, your explanatory style is way, way off. That's way more reactive than you need to do. And he'll say, I should have put them here and this. Don't should on yourself. Take the preventative measure of monitoring your self-talk. Think about that ticker tape that goes through. But then you also need to regulate your self-esteem. And what I mean by that is I'm not here to coddle and to puff up how wonderful and amazing you are and that you can do anything you want to do, because no one can. Part of having a proper self-esteem is to have an honesty about who you are, warts and all. A friend of mine who is an Imagineer at Walt Disney said, Jeff, you need to be you, actual size. Be you, actual size. Good and bad, and know what that is, and then have the esteem to move forward in life without shooting on yourself all the time. Because that's how you engage fear today. That's how you become resilient. But you also don't want to go it alone. Don't go it alone. It's no fun to be in a relationship with yourself alone. Have someone else that you go through life with. And yet we grew up in this country with that rugged individualist mindset that we're going to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, whatever that means, and we're going to do it on our own. But in order to be resilient, in order to engage the fear we're facing and the uncertainty of the world that we're living in, you need to ask others to join you. And you can do that if you rely on some relational resources. The first relational resource, of course, that we're getting more and more familiar with are social networks. And you can relate and connect with people all over the world, and the connections can multiply exponentially the number of people in your social network. They say, back in the 1950s, they said that there was 6 degrees of separation between you and anyone else, which meant that between me and anyone else in the world, there were 5 intermediaries. Today, because of all the connections that we have in our lives, that degree of separation is 3, which means that between you and any other person on the planet are 2 intermediaries. If you just thought about them and explored them enough, you would find out what they are. And as I was going over that statistic with my wife, we sat down and we said, well, that means that we're 3 degrees removed from Barack Obama. And we figured out within a half hour that we are in 2 ways. So if you have anything you want me to bring to him, any advice about anything, I'll see what I can do. 3 degrees. So in order to not go it alone, rely on your social networks. But those aren't enough. Oftentimes those can be the surface relationships that we have. You also need to rely on your intimate bonds. How do you know who you are? Have you ever really asked that question? How do you know who you are? And I would say you know who you are because you're in relationship with someone else. You're getting feedback from people. They are giving you the feedback as to what irritates them about you. They're giving you the feedback as to what makes them laugh about you. They're giving you feedback. The only way you know who you are is because you're in relationships with other people and in intimate bonds with a few. So rely on your social networks, but you also need to not go it alone because you need to rely on your intimate bonds. And in a nutshell, that means be connected. When I was in college, and before I knew that bipolar was what I dealt with, my roommate was awesome. He could sense when I was getting ready to go down and the depression was coming. He would grab me and get me off the couch, and we'd go outside and we'd go on a walk. But it wasn't just any walk. He would bring out Swisher Sweet cigars. Have you ever had the Swisher Sweets? I don't even know if you can buy them anymore, but they have that sweet tip on the end. And we would go around the neighborhood smoking Swisher Sweet cigars. And it elevated my mood, and it got me out of the funk that I was so afraid I was going to go into. And you have to ask yourself, who or what are your Swisher Sweets? Who or what are your Swisher Sweets that you can help go through life together that are going to buoy you up and help you to be resilient to engage the stress and strain of this uncertain world? So don't go it alone. Another is we need to laugh deeply and laugh often. Now I want everybody to stand up and tickle the person next to them. No one did it, but everyone's laughing. Why is that? It's because laughter helps diffuse some stressful situations, right? We begin to laugh and we begin to chuckle, but there's something therapeutic about laughing. You all laughed at that because it helped diffuse the tension that I just asked you to do. And if you think about the tense moments in your life, laughter can do the same thing. If you laugh deeply and often, you do that because you have to understand its benefits. It's incredibly therapeutic. That great American philosopher Jimmy Buffett once said that if we all couldn't laugh, we would all go insane. I love that. We need to laugh deeply and we need to laugh often. It's therapeutic. There has been studies of people who have actually healed some of the illnesses that they've had just by watching I Love Lucy every night before they go to bed. They laugh their way to health. And there's something that's released, the endorphins. There's pleasure centers that are fired when we laugh, and it does help diffuse some stressful situations. And it's also incredibly contagious. It's more contagious, laughter is, than a cold, or it's spread easier than even a cough. Because if one person begins to laugh pretty hard, the other person begins to laugh also. And there's something about the belly laughs together that make a huge difference. So in order to be resilient, in order to bounce back, we need to laugh deeply and often. We need to be whimsical. And finally, I think the last resilient rule of engagement for engaging this uncertain time is you need to practice bricolage. Bricolage is a word that I just came across a couple months ago. It's real low as far as its familiarity with the English language. It's way down there, but I thought it was perfect. Because bricolage basically means it is your ability to take whatever is at hand nearby you, regardless of what it is, and do something powerful with it. To take whatever is around you, whatever resources you find, no matter how scant they are, and you do something with them to make something of your life. That is practicing bricolage. And you do that if you enact some techniques from improvisation. If you've seen improvisation, there are some techniques there that can help us to be resilient. Because as they are on stage and they're doing their improvisation, they are dealing with the situation as they find it. They're dealing with it. They're not changing it. This is it. This is the craziness of it, and we're going to deal with the situation. And that's exactly what we have to do if we want to practice bricolage. We have to face the situation in order to move the scene forward. But they also are very intuitive. They trust their gut as to the response that comes out of their brain. Because once it comes out here and it has to come quick, they can't take it back. So people who are good at improv, they think with their gut, they think on their feet, they think intuitively, and they make the decisions. And that's exactly what you do when you do bricolage. You move the scene forward, you accept the situation as it is, and then you trust your gut and you trust your instinct to work with that. If you're a Gen Xer in here, and I do some presentations on generational dynamics, and if you're an Xer here, you may remember the show MacGyver. Xers loved MacGyver because MacGyver was a secret agent, quote unquote, who could take a roll of toilet paper and a used piece of gum and get out of a high security prison. Incredibly good at bricolage. And so when people tell you think outside the box, which is getting really old and tired, think inside the box and use everything you have and make it sing. Practice bricolage. All that is to say, I remember hearing an interview on National Public Radio after one of the major hurricanes hit the shore of the United States. And there was destruction everywhere. Trees and boats and everything, and it was just this mayhem. And a geologist was being interviewed by the interviewer on NPR. And the interviewer asked the geologist, well, in the midst of all of this mess, what are you hoping to find? And I kind of sensed from the reporter that she was expecting a not very helpful, hopeful answer. But the answer of the geologist surprised me. He said, I am going to go out and I am going to find a new beach. I'm going to go out in the midst of all this wreckage, of all this uncertainty, of all this chaos from this storm, and I am going to find a new beach. And humans have an amazing capacity to be resilient, to bounce back, and to find a new beach. Each and every one of us have that incredible capacity. And we can engage the chaos. We can engage the wreckage. We can engage the fear. We can ditch our brown pants and begin to do something effective with managing the fear of our day and uncertain economic times. Be ready not to be ready. Make full use of the present. Live with the long view. Let go of what's going away. Take time to think. Don't should on yourself. Don't go it alone. Laugh deeply and laugh often. And finally, practice bricolage. Now, I have a little bookmark here, if you're at all interested, obviously for a very big book, which has some of these resilience skills on the back. And if you'd like one of these, if you just give me how to contact you with a business card, and I will also send you a link to an ebook on being resilient, as well as an audio download of an extended version of a workshop of this. So, just FYI for your information. And I want to thank you very much for your attention and for having me be here this afternoon. Thank you.